So again, if we have that major disaster, I was talking to the county geologist the other day, and I said, when's that happening, Jim? And he goes, well, I can tell you, it will happen. So in that earthquake that's going to hit us, if we have that major earthquake that starts down in the Salton Sea area and comes up the coast, we probably aren't going to be able to rely upon those, and Kelly, you can tell me I'm crazy or what, but on those mutual aid agreements from Los Angeles and some of the other communities.
No, if it's that widespread, I mean, they're going to be impacted just as much as anybody else, so we're going to be looking outward even further. Everything's going to go out in concentric rings as far as where we're getting help from. It's just like with our wildland fires. If everybody's busy in California, it's going to be coming from Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, even Alaska, Florida. So that's how that all works, is closest availability. And if our closest availability aren't available, we're going to branch out. We're going to get help from somewhere else.
Yeah, that earthquake on the Salton Sea, there's a, you can go online and get the animation for the earthquake that originates there and then travels north. And what we expect here in Ventura County is about 2 minutes of severe shaking. That's a long time. I think Northridge was maybe 16 seconds. So imagine 2 minutes.
So the whole Oxnard Plain area, which includes Port Hueneme, is on a huge alluvial fan, which is ground basically that is washed down. That when it comes to shaking, they call it liquefaction. So it's going to shake and shake and shake and shake and shake.
So we have high water table, loose soil conditions, and
right. So the theme is here: be prepared. Semper Paratus is if there's any Coast Guard people in here, always be prepared. The Red Cross, again, they're here to help out. You may be sheltering in a shelter, but guess what? At your local community center here or at your church, you may be setting up a shelter there because we don't have sufficient resources, because guess what? All the Red Cross people here are going to be affected by the same disaster. So when it comes to training, all the Red Cross training that they offer is free. So we offer training in psychological first aid, there's training in first aid, CPR, AED, there's training in how to operate and run a shelter. 2 weeks ago we had a drill out at the Camarillo Airport where we ran through a whole shelter. From A to Z. We got the call from the Office of Emergency Services, we opened up the shelter and then ran through that whole process with volunteers so that they can learn how to do that. So all of this is good training not only for the community to help out, but it's also valuable for you individually and your community, your smaller community. So whether that's your neighborhood, your church, or a school where you may open up a shelter. The other thing about shelters in an earthquake is that we're not going to go into any building until it's been inspected by a building inspector county to say it's safe, because we're not going to put you into some place that's not safe. So what does that mean? Pardon? Time. Yeah, we don't know when we're going to be able to get that. Those resources are going to be stretched thin. So, you may be out in a tent at Bubbling Springs Park down here. So, you have to be prepared for any of these events. It's not all doom and gloom. So again, anybody that has a background in any of these areas, and I'm not going to go through them all because you can read, but there's almost endless possibilities of volunteering with the Red Cross. I've been around for, again, 15 years or so. Paul, how long have you been around?
About 2 years.
About 2 years. So, and unfortunately, most of the Red Cross volunteers kind of look like I do. They're kind of old, kind of have white hair. So it's good to have young people like Paul in there because we need that next generation to come out and do it. When you're working 12-hour shifts, I don't know how any of you feel about that, but it gets old real quick. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about your community. Thank you for caring, about each other and a desire to help your neighbors, not only in Port Hueneme, but you may be called on them to help in Oxnard. You may be called in to help them in Puerto Rico or wherever else. So, we live in a small community, and that community is called the world. So, the more we can help each other, the better off we'll be. So, thank you very much.
name's Omar. This is Claudio from the Mexican consulate. Basically, we're just here to support our community, let everyone know that we're here. If you guys have any friends, families, or anyone who's a Mexican nationalist, tell them to come by our offices at the Mexican consulate. We do offer different types of services, legal services, housing services, financial services, documentation services, all that type of stuff. Feel free to stop by. If you guys have any questions on what it is that, or what we can help out with, feel free to let us know. We also brought flyers and stuff like that that have all of the services that we offer, all of the requirements, and stuff like that. And with that being said, I just want to thank you guys for coming here. We appreciate you guys supporting our community and being there for one another. And yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
It's question and answer time. I hope you have questions. I hope we have answers. All the speakers are still here. So anybody have a, yes, you. And you can say if it's for somebody specific.
Well, not really, it's about FEMA.
Okay.
So, then a lot of structures are all damaged in houses and there's no communications and you can't make your house payment and now you're gonna need help from FEMA. How do you get a hold of them? Do they come out to communities? Do you have to go wherever they're centrally located? How does that work?
You want to take that one? Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So that's a great question. So part of what the Red Cross does is we'll set up what we call MARCs. It's a multi-agency resource center. So in a disaster that's widespread, affected a big area, we will coordinate FEMA, insurance companies, and all the county social services type agencies to come in and coordinate that effort. So there will be a central location where you can access FEMA.
I have a question, two questions actually. One is, where are the shelters in Port Hueneme and what do they shelter you from? And then the second thing is, I'm on the other side of the railroad tracks in Surfside 4, so right across from the Port Hueneme pier. If there's an earthquake, is it likely the railroad tracks could get mishmashed and maybe we couldn't drive over them? So shelters and railroad tracks.
Well, a lot of times, shelters are planned for, but they're not necessarily identified, because they want to identify them. They have the potential sites, but they'll identify them when they need to be opened. So they have the designations, but they'll make the notifications. And it would be if, like in Surfside, if your house is untenable, you couldn't go there. You need some place to be out of the elements, get a warm meal, get a place, a safe place where you could, get some rest, gather your thoughts, things like that. So that's to answer your question about the shelters. About the railroad tracks, I don't know specifically. I mean, I wouldn't think necessarily that the railroad tracks would be so damaged that they were impassable, but I could be very much wrong. I don't know. I think it all depends on the type of seismic event.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, so a couple years ago, we met with Red Cross and we identified several locations in the city that could be used as a shelter if the need arose. This building is one of them, the community center, our elementary schools. We don't have any high schools or any other large buildings, so it's kind of what we were limited to. This is also a cooling center. And so when there are heat events, we work with Sheriff's OES and we open this as a cooling center so that people can come here and get out of the heat.
Yeah, so the Red Cross has agreements with a number. We don't own any buildings ourselves, but we have agreements with people throughout the county, with the city, with the school districts, where for potential shelter location. Because this is identified as a shelter doesn't mean it will necessarily be a shelter. It depends on the event, where the event's at, and whether this building is usable and would be safe in the event. So there are a number of pre-identified shelters throughout the county.
So we really haven't had to think much about nuclear war in quite a while, and is there updated information on any of these websites about what to do? And the reason I ask is I realize that a lot of my
water that I have plenty of in case of emergencies outside, but I think they recommend that you stay
Stay
inside.
inside.
So I'm just wondering if there are other information on the website so I have to be.
Yes, there is. In fact, our own Dr. Levin, Public Health Officer here in Ventura County, spearheaded a planning and preparedness effort for nuclear attacks, things that might happen in Los Angeles and affect us here locally. So if you go onto the Ventura County Public Health website or even on readyventura.gov, and yeah, you should be able to find the information there. And you also put out a little musical video, so people don't get too frightened about it, but they know that there's action. You go inside and stay inside, and wait for further instructions. It's basically
In the back.
I love the speakers, thank you so much. You mentioned all the different ways to communicate, and one of the very best ways I know of is the community events. So we have the Banana Festival coming up, we have those city council meetings. You know right now the disaster is top of mind. This is the time to grab our attention. This is one of the few times we're paying attention to this. So first of all, are you going to be at the Banana Festival? If not, let's take your brochures and go to the Banana Festival, because they're paying attention to this now. Same thing at the council meetings. If all you did was allot 3 minutes of the brochures are in the back, somebody stood up and mentioned it, I can guarantee you that information will fly out the door. You have to leverage the fear we're in now.
right.
I'll take that back to my chiefs, and if I can show up, I will.
I suspect that the Community Core Council is also going to plan on spending a lot of time in front of City Council, since it was a council-approved program. The money was allocated by City Council, and so that group will be giving regular updates to City Council as well as to the community at large.
Yeah. And my vision is that we're going to get a banner, we're going to be able to staff booths with the help of you all, and help communicate the message, because you're right, we need to take advantage of the time when people.
It's a moment in time.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, one of the, I live in a large HOA, and we've been working hard at trying to get ourselves prepared. And we've been told in a week to 10 days, you might be on your own. So we have, so our committee goes out to the community, and we have lists of, things you need to have. We use the FEMA materials and all. But the first thing is, so that you don't become the victim, you've got to be ready.
Right.
So get yourself ready first, and then start spreading out to the community, which is what we do with our community, to get them ready first, and then we try to work with others. And then as far as communication, landlines, they say, are, those of us who chose to keep our landline. But also, what about the broadband or some sort of radio communication that people have mentioned? I don't know, like ham operator, that kind of thing.
The thing about those is they're not widely used. It's just like I get laughed at because when I'm taking out my RV, I have a CB radio.
Yeah.
And the thought behind that is I'm traveling through the desert where there's not a lot of infrastructure. CHP still listens to CBs, but I'm not the norm. People don't have CB radios anymore, just
But
like
should
you
we
don't
get
have.
them? Is it something that you, I don't know.
So there is a group in the county called the Auxiliary Communication Services, the ACS, and they're actually deployed through the Sheriff's Department, but it is a group of ham radio
We
operators.
need to find ones who live here in Fort
Right,
Wayne.
so there's a number of CERTs, for instance, I think there's a CERT group in Leisure Village. They have a number of ham radio operators. They have their own little ham radio shack, as they call it. The Red Cross has a ham radio shack in the Sheriff's Office of Emergency Services. The Auxiliary Communication Services also goes down there. So at least there is that redundancy in terms of communication. There are repeaters and everything else that are involved, and they also could go down. So it's not a perfect system, but you plan for the best you can.
Just to add to that, in our station, we do have ham radios, and they were purchased through a UASI grant. There are amateur radio operators that come in, and they will man those if the need arises.
So what would be how far would they reach to?
Go international.
You can talk all over the world with them.
Right, most of the radios that are out there are line of sight, so you're not gonna get a long ways on them. But they have repeaters, so if you can get to that repeater, then you can go to there, and eventually you could go around the world.
Ours are
Yeah.
tied into our regular communications antenna, yeah, so they're gonna be able to get some pretty good.
Every Tuesday night in the county, they have a ham radio net where they practice, so they're preparedness.
All right, Beth,
I'm one of those ham radio operators
Oh.
at ACS. I got my license the first time when I was 53, after finishing cert class. If you can pass a driver's license test, you can pass a ham radio license test. And we need more hams. We need more. It's not that hard. You start with a technician license. If you want to talk farther than that, you can test up another couple levels, but a tech license will get you into touch. $4 to take the test. If you want to take the test, we'll set up a test for you. So, we need more hams.
thank you.
It's not hard.
All right, Mayor.
I gotta reveal to you a secret, and that is I didn't get the memo when I was elected to the city council about our own disaster preparedness planning, okay? And we've got representatives from the school. We don't have anybody from the harbor here, and perhaps nobody from the Navy, but those are gonna be the entities that are really gonna be the safety net. And I would ask that you somehow coordinate those entities, because I don't know what our friends at the Hueneme Elementary School District has in the way of their own disaster planning, or the harbor, or the Navy.
Right.
And yet we have these great resources, and I'm unaware of how they're being coordinated.
Right.
So-
That's one of the purposes of the Citizen Core Council, and we do have our school district rep back here from Hueneme School District. Do you want to talk just briefly, like, give us a...
I didn't mean to put you on.
On what the school preparedness plans are?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Carlos Dominguez. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources with the Hueneme School District. And I'm here, as like our other community members, I grew up in South Oxnard, went to a product of the Hueneme School District and Hueneme High School. So I'm really, and still live in the area, so vested in the community, number one. But number two, really looking at what resources are available to our students should an emergency happen during school hours. So we're in the process as our school district in reaching out and working with our community resources to revisit and revise our own emergency operation plan to ensure that in the case of an event or a natural disaster or whatnot during school hours, that our kids, your kids, our students are well taken care of. So there, again, we let it go a little bit, I'll be quite honest with you, but we understand even before these events were taking place that this is something that we really need to revisit and put some priority to. So we're definitely in the process of making sure that we're having open communications with the fire department and the police department and any other resources that should be available to us should an event happen during school hours.
So the bottom line is, this is very timely, and I'm looking forward to your leadership to pull these resources together. And then obviously the folks that are here and those that wish to be a part of this communication process, I encourage you to become volunteers, because we're going to need everybody in it together as a community. So I salute you and thank you so much for the program.
Thank you. All right, I think
I
that's
have a
it.
quick comment. One quick comment, just to touch on the mayor's point. So what we do, as far as a partnership with the Navy base and the port, is every year we're involved in a exercise called Coastal Trident. And it involves about 90 first responder agencies. And we run through different scenarios. It lasts about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. And that really is kind of a lab to find out how well we communicate with each other, how well all our processes work. There's an after action report that's published. Unfortunately, it's not classified, but it is a controlled document. The exercise is put on by the Center for Threat Management. It was formerly called the Center for Asymmetric Warfare. And so those working relationships are well established. And So they weren't here tonight, but we do that every year. We're getting ready to start the planning for next year's. I'll make sure that an invitation is extended to everyone on city council that you can come out and observe the exercise.
All right, well, thank you all.